So one of the main arguments we heard back in 2016 when Donald Trump ran for president was that he was a good businessman and that we needed a businessman to be the president. Now, back then I was pulling for Bernie Sanders, so I understand wanting something different, because back then I would say to people, you know, we've had a Bush or a Clinton in the White House my entire life, and I would like to see change. I would like to see something different. I understand that, but even back then I never understood calling Donald Trump a good businessman, because anyone who had ever done business with him talked about how terrible he was at it, and the guy bankrupted a casino, okay? So that I never could understand their argument for that, but he was able to sell it to them and make them believe it. Now, here's a clip I want you guys to watch of Miles Taylor. Miles Taylor worked in the Trump administration, and he's pointing out that, no, Donald Trump is not a good businessman at all. Take a look at this.
But I'm going to go back to the beginning, because a great businessman makes a great president, in my view. Donald Trump is not a great businessman. He is a failed businessman across the board. Trump Steaks and Trump Vodka and Trump Airlines, and we could go on and on. A rejoinder, though, might be folks who say, but no, he's rich, so he must be a great businessman. Well, Al Capone was rich. Al Capone was incredibly rich. You can be rich and not be a great businessman. You can be a fraud. And we've seen this with Donald Trump throughout his history. The man, even people who've been huge supporters of his, have come away saying he's a total fraud. He swindled me in this business deal or that business deal. So I do still think great businessmen can make great presidents, but he is not one. And in fact, all the characteristics that made him a failed businessman, he took into the White House. And in a lot of ways, he made the U.S. government his largest failed venture yet. He rendered so many departments and agencies effectively incapable of discharging their duties because of his volatility and his corrupt nature. I saw it in our own department. It was supposed to be my job to support the work of the 250,000 men and women under me at the Department of Homeland Security. But instead, because the president was so impulsive, I had to spend all of my time focused on one person. I had to spend my time focused on how do we manage the president. That's not the sign of a good businessman. He's clearly not communicating and delegating really well. That's the sign of the exact opposite. And that's just how he governed in a first term with those quote unquote guardrails in place. I think it would be a great deal worse in a second term. And I wouldn't think that, I don't think business leaders should get too excited about a Trump second term being better for them economically than a Biden term. And I hear this argument from Wall Street execs and Wall Street billionaires that it'll be better under Trump than it has been under Biden. If there's one thing that matters to American businesses, it's stability, it's consistency. It's why we live in a land of laws. It's why the rule of law is good for economies and democracies and for human flourishing. A second Donald Trump term will be so volatile, from our relations with the world to domestic policy to the stability of the executive branch itself, that I think it will be very dangerous and destabilizing for American businesses and American trade. And I think it's important for conservatives to know that.
Now, I'm sure if Donald Trump saw that, he would immediately say, well, the guy's a con, the guy's, it's all fake news, whatever. But you got to remember, Donald Trump also said that he picked the best and the brightest. He only would have the best people working around him. And then everyone that works around him talks about just how incompetent he is. They talk about how that is total chaos because he knows nothing about how government works. I've sat here for the longest time and said he ushered in people into the conversation that knew nothing about government and how it works, but he himself knows nothing either. And it was a complete and total disaster the entire time he was there. But yet he's still able to sell people on this idea that he is some kind of good businessman. Now, what I find interesting is that according to the Forbes 400 list, Donald Trump is worth $4.1 billion. He claims he's worth $10 billion. Back in 1982, he was on the same list, and they said it was $200 million. He claimed it to be $500 million. So I think we're seeing a pattern here. But had Donald Trump invested his money in 1982, say that he retired, invested his money in 1982, that $500 million, had he invested it into S&P 500, by the year 2014, he would have been worth $20 billion. So tell me again how he's a smart businessman. Like Miles said, just because you're rich does not mean you're a smart businessman. Al Capone was a rich guy, but this guy went out here and he conned everyone into believing that he was some kind of genius. And they believed that because they sat back and they watched him on The Apprentice, they watched him on TV their entire life, and they thought, okay, yeah, let's have a businessman in office. Okay, well, you know what? If we go back to 2016 and you were one of those people, and I have friends that did this, and I don't hold it against them at all. If you were one of the people back in 2016 who said, you know what? I just would like to see something different. I've had a Bush or a Clinton in the White House my entire life. I would like to see something different. Let's try it out with this guy right here. If you said that then, I can give you a pass for it. At the end of his presidency, if you couldn't see through it by then, I don't really know what to say for you. And if you're still there hanging on to the bitter end today, I really don't have much to say to you. I don't know how that anyone could entertain it now, when the guy has failed at everything he ever attempted, including being a businessman, including being a president. And he will go back and he will say, oh, well, that guy, he was a crook, he was a con. Yet he's the same guy that told you, I only hire the best, I only work with the best. If everybody that he worked with in the first term came out and said, hey, this guy's complete and total chaos, if they all said that, then why are we to believe that the next go around he's going to pick a new batch of people that's going to be better? No, what he's going to do is he's going to put in inexperienced people in those places who will just be his yes men and his yes women. That's what the guy's going to do. And anyone that has a voice of reason inside them should look at this situation and go, we do not need to hand the reins of the free world back over to Donald Trump. There's no world where that makes sense. He failed the first time. He's been a failure ever since. And as far as, I can prove the election was rigged, he's never been able to prove that either. Everything is just one big conspiracy to the guy. Everything is just that the world is out to get him. And how is it that people can sit there and they can believe that the entire world, the entire universe is out to get Donald Trump, but they can't entertain the idea that maybe, just maybe, he was a con man from day one?